Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Katie, a member of the CK-12 team, and my colleague Lindsay and I will be running today's webinar, FLEXBOOKS 101. We're so glad you've joined us and are participating in our CK-12 Certified Educator program.
Yes, thank you to everyone who's joining us today. I'm excited to be one of your presenters as we discuss the many ways you can customize CK-12 FLEXBOOKS to fit your individual needs. Before we get into today's content, just want to make sure you guys are using Zoom in the way that we intend, which it looks like you are. There's so many people already chatting. The key thing we need you guys to remember is to send your messages in the chat window to all panelists and attendees so that the entire community can see what you're chatting. In the Q&A window, that's the best place to ask questions for our presenters to answer throughout the presentation.
Now, most of you are here as part of the Certified Educator program. I just want to remind you about a few program links. You can register for any new session at any time on ck12.org/jumpstart. To find information about the requirements of the program, office hours, session assignments, and archived webinars, you'll want to visit the program homepage at ck12.org/certified2017.
Okay, before we get started today, let's find out a bit more about you and your interests in FLEXBOOKS. So you're going to see a poll here in a second that's going to prompt you to respond to a short question. Here's what we want to know. Have you used and or customized a CK-12 FLEXBOOK? Your options are, I have yet to use a CK-12 FLEXBOOK. I use FLEXBOOKS without customizing them. I customize FLEXBOOKS, and I have built a FLEXBOOK from scratch. We're gonna pause for a minute while you guys answer that question. Looks like most of you have about locked in your answers. And I think we're gonna go ahead and end the poll, and then we'll show you guys the results. I guess about what I would expect today. This is FLEXBOOKS 101, so it makes sense that the majority of you have yet to use a CK-12 FLEXBOOK. And then some of you have used one, but you've never gone into the customization, which we're going to get you started on today. Those of you who have customized a FLEXBOOK, hopefully you're going to pick up on some extra tips here today to help you continue to do that. And also feel free to type in your advice and experiences that you've had in the chat window. And then looks like one person has built a FLEXBOOK from scratch, and that's something, you know, we'll share that you have the option to do that as well. So I'm liking what we're seeing today, Katie, with our mix of people.
Excellent. So today's session is called FLEXBOOKS 101. For those of you brand new to FLEXBOOKS, or perhaps those of you who have used our FLEXBOOKS but never really customized for your specific curriculum, this is a great place to get started. Specifically during this webinar, we'll be covering the following topics. Why choose a CK-12 FLEXBOOK? What features make CK-12 unique, and why customizable and shareable content is so important in the teaching profession. Finding a FLEXBOOK in CK-12 content. Navigating CK-12 to find concepts, original FLEXBOOKS, concept collection FLEXBOOKS, and user-generated content. Customizing a FLEXBOOK. The basics of editing, from deleting to reordering, adding and uploading content, as well as best practices for working collaboratively with our books. And then publishing and sharing your FLEXBOOKS, how to get your books in the hands of colleagues and students through the unique URL, schools page, share a plane, and offline reader.
So by the end of this session, you're going to be able to do, hopefully, all of these things here. And this matches pretty closely the assignment that we're going to ask you to do at the end of the session. We're going to help you find a FLEXBOOK to customize. You can start a new FLEXBOOK from scratch, customize a FLEXBOOK, add chapters, sections, reorder, delete, make basic edits, publish and share a FLEXBOOK, understand the best practices when collaborating with a colleague, and we'll always give you some ideas for how to use these with students.
Now, for those of you that choose to take an advanced FLEXBOOK editing session either tomorrow or later this summer, here are the types of things we're going to cover in that session. uploading and editing the images for their kind of formatting for them, embedding videos and practice, and clarifying stuff with different formatting options like headers and tables and element boxes, as well as the difference between what you might see online and if you downloaded a PDF of your book. So if you're wanting additional help with any of these skills right now, please be aware that this is FLEXBOOKS 101, which focuses on the basics. So we're going to prioritize questions related to the basics during the webinar. Don't worry, we'll stay on as always to address any complex editing questions that need a live demonstration at the end of our presentation. We also encourage you to join us for that advanced editing session or sign up for office hours.
So why choose a Flexbook? What makes us different from other content providers or platforms? You have a choice when choosing how to deliver content for your students. You could use a traditional textbook, one that costs a fortune, weighs 10 pounds, is outdated from the minute it's on your shelves, and one that never follows the sequence of how you teach your subject. But many of you are here today because you've already decided that that model is outdated and just too costly as more and more schools are becoming budget conscious. So then you're faced with another choice of how to replace those textbooks and still have quality curriculum to give your students. Some teachers are using Google Docs, the solution, but as many of you know, this isn't always the best replacement for a book. It's a lot of different things in a lot of different places, and students and parents sometimes feel like they're missing out with a single source of content. So this is where CK-12 FLEXBOOKS can really change everything for you. About a month ago, I was in Liberty, Missouri, where they're at the start of this process. They have amazing teachers who are working in PLCs to compile their content that they've created themselves and content that they've curated from other open educational sources in a sequence that works for their school. So they've done all the right things and they're already customizing for their needs of their students, but now they're stuck. They don't know the best delivery method for their content. So that's where CK-12 FLEXBOOKS, our platform, comes in as the best way to get quality, customized content in the hands of students.
One major advantage to CK-12's customizable content and interactive books is that they can be accessed anywhere, anytime, and on any device. You have the power to read the entire collection of CK-12 FLEXBOOKS on any personal device, and you can download the textbooks to read offline with our app. Our friends in Liberty are going to compile all of their content in a FLEXBOOK, and all of the students are going to have access to it on their devices through a URL. Now, one of the missions of CK-12 is to get our books in the hands of any student who wants to learn, even in areas where internet isn't as readily available. So that's why we have recently released our Chrome offline reader, making the content available without consistent connectivity, even beyond personal devices. So be sure to go to the app or Google Play stores and download the app. Or click on the offline reader link on any FLEXBOOK page. And remember, all of our resources are free at CK-12. You won't be asked for a credit card or hit a paywall. We are a nonprofit trying to make education accessible, and we're proud to be a cost-free solution for you.
While we don't charge for any of our content, you can still rest assured that our FLEXBOOKS are the highest quality. To write our FLEXBOOKS, we follow a model much like those of the traditional publishers. Our content has been developed by over 100 PhDs, professors, teachers, authors, NASA scientists, and other subject matter and domain experts over the past 10 years. You can always see a list of our authors on the Meet the Team page. So while we are like traditional publishers in the creation of our content, the benefits of using a FLEXBOOK is the ability to customize with interactive modalities, with videos, with resources you curate from other sources, all of this bringing your content to life. Another thing you can't do with a textbook is translate it into another language. Well, you can with CK-12 FLEXBOOKS. We have some Spanish editions of FLEXBOOKS built on our site, but with the Google Translate option at the bottom of the screen, you have the ability to change any of our content into almost any language. One of the few concerns I hear when I go out into schools is that, with a digital textbook, students lose the ability to write in the margins or to highlight in a book. Our FLEXBOOKS allow students to use highlighters right on their screen and take any notes that will be available on their accounts.
I think now is a good time to show you a couple of minutes of video footage highlighting some of our Flexbook users in Utah, Texas, Tennessee, and Idaho. You'll also get a glimpse of our executive director and co-founder, Miru Khosla, who started CK-12 back in 2007 to radically change the old textbook model.
I love learning, and I actually really love books. But the problem with textbooks is that they are actually very limiting format, and not every child can learn from that. Textbooks are created to be average, so you cover almost every kind of student. The problem is that that doesn't work for every student. That's why we created FLEXBOOks. These are textbooks that are current, customizable, and of course, free.
We would be flat as teachers if we weren't always asking ourselves, what's in the student's best interest? What's going to be down the tunnel for them? Down the tunnel for them is less and less printed textbooks and more digital resources. And I'm not preparing them for their futures if I'm not learning how to use those resources as well.
CK-12 was an obvious choice for us. We were able to experience some cost savings with it. The content is rich, it's engaging to students, and it's flexible. So it allows us to really tailor the tools to meet the needs of the instruction.
We can embed multimedia components to make it more engaging for our students, to make it more relevant for our students, so that they're no longer using a static textbook, but one that's dynamic and rigorous and high quality and easily updated. Teachers can go and find a textbook that meets their needs, and they can constantly revise and edit as they go along.
CK-12 actually meets and exceeds the standards that are required by our curriculum, our state and district curriculum.
I didn't realize that something this simple as online textbooks could change the way that I teach that much, but it's been pretty much a door that has opened that I can't close anymore.
If I were speaking to someone that was considering the CK-12, I would say don't hesitate because of just the savings and just the practicality of it, but the current information and the ease of use with our students who are engaged with technology, there's just nothing else out there like it.
Okay, we're going to stop here in just a minute. I want to show you a few more things before we go into our Q&A, but just want to encourage you guys to keep typing in your questions to the Q&A window, and we're going to get to them in just a moment. But I want to show you just how easy this process of customizing a Flexbook can be. We're going to show you how to make, all kinds of changes, start a book from scratch, truly customize the content where you are writing it, editing it, adding videos, etc. But you can also just come to CK12.org, take one of our Flexbooks, and get it in the hands of students within about 5 or 10 minutes. So let me really quickly show you how easy this can be if you want it to be. You would first go to one of our subjects and you would pick a branch that fits your needs in your classroom. Just to show you, these are some of our common books that are used across the world, really. Middle school Flexbooks for science, for math, and then also our high school Flexbooks for science and math. So perhaps you want to pick one of these books and use it in your classroom. Well, I confess I'm a former English teacher, so I didn't pick one of those math or science books. I picked the Common Sense Composition book that's on the CK-12 website under Writing. And what I would do is I would open up that book and you would see a table of contents very similar to what you would see in a printed textbook. But over on the left side, I've got the ability to click Customize and take ownership of this book. So when I click Customize, it's going to ask me to give it a different title. So I got really crafty and I called it Lindsay's Common Sense Composition book. And at that point, I click Save. And I'm going to have a custom URL here. At the top, you can see that it's CK12.org with some other stuff there, and Lindsay's Common Sense Composition book. that is the URL that I could put on my learning management system, that I could email to my students, to my parents. And that's the very start of me using a CK-12 Flexbook with my class. So it can be that easy. You guys can grab one of our resources and run with it. So I don't want you to get overwhelmed or intimidated by all of the following steps that we're going to show you about customization.
Great. So as Lindsay was saying, it can be super simple, but we're going to go into how to find content so you know where to start.
Before we do that, Katie, why don't we go ahead and answer a few of the Q&A questions before we start sharing. So the first question that I'm going to throw your way is, one of our users said, I like the Flexbooks. Are there accompanying video components? And can the practice quiz grades be captured for formative assessment? So I guess kind of two parts there. Why don't we talk about videos and then, get into practice and student reports.
Sure. So as you'll see as I start navigating and pulling up this content, some of it includes videos already embedded. You have the option to embed practice in your books as well, and then kind of assign the matching practice to your group and see how students are doing. Those areas are going to be covered in that advanced Flexbook editing session tomorrow. So yes is the short answer to your question. And then if you want to see it, we can stay on and go through those details today, or you can join us tomorrow or later this summer.
Okay, a couple of clarification questions. One is, are the Flexbooks geared toward middle and high school students only? And then also, Katie, why don't you talk about the offline use again? Because a user asks, is that something that's available for Chromebooks?
Sure, and why don't I just start sharing my screen so you can see this for a second. So the first question was, are they geared only for middle school and high school? And so you will be excited to know that we just recently launched K-5 science textbooks. And we have one algebra book for elementary school, but we also have a lot of UGC, or what we call user-generated content, which is content that the community republishes on our site. And that covers a number of different topic areas and grade levels as we work our way through. And then accessing it offline, we do have an app. So if you go down to our tools and apps page, you can see that we have a Flexbook app that allows you to access our content online and offline. And I'll show you where the offline reader is on any of the pages as I work our way through.
All right, a couple of questions I'll field. Somebody asked, can I have the link to the video that Katie just played in the webinar? Absolutely. Our www.ck12.org/testimonials that somebody can put in the chat window here is where we've compiled a lot of these individual user stories. Also, our YouTube page at CK-12 Foundation on YouTube has copies of all of our videos, but we'll grab the link to that specific one here in a little bit. I'll probably look it up and put it in the chat window, but absolutely, we love to share our user stories with you.
So it looks like we're getting a lot of questions about how this works, and we haven't really even gone into showing you anything. So let's see if we can answer some of these questions in our demonstration today. And then we'll pause again after we kind of show you where to find resources to answer some more questions. So let's go back to our homepage. This CK-12 logo will always get you back to your homepage. So that's a great option. And kind of when I talk to people about how they use CK-12, I usually break it down into asking them what they're looking to do first. So let's say you were just trying to find resources to teach for a particular topic, whether that's, next period or down the road or whatever that looks like. So if that's the case, you can always use our search bar. So let's say I was looking for heat and temperature. You'll see an introduction video. You can filter by grade level. If I scroll down a bit, I can filter by modality type, and I'll talk about that in a second if that word is new for you. And then I can pick kind of any topic. So let's say I picked heat, temperature, and thermal energy transfer. Now at the top of this page, you can see what we call our featured content and multiple modalities. So we really believe in learning across different methods, using different resources. And so we wanted to give students the opportunity to explore a concept in multiple ways. So we have our basic read, which would be the section of a textbook, some videos, our practice system. Because this is a physics concept, or if it was chemistry, you might see an interactive simulation as well. And then our Plix interactives, which are available for both math and science. So all of these are your options. And you can kind of take any of these resources and use them as is, or you could take this particular read and add it to a Flexbook. So if you were going to build a Flexbook from scratch, but you wanted to kind of mix and match from different places, you could always click this Add to Flexbook option. So that's one way to kind of access content through the search. And let's go back one page for a second to that search option. And here you'll see CK-12 content, and then you'll also see community contributed content. And CK-12 curates and updates all of this stuff in the CK-12 content tab. And then anything after that is something that's been customized or written by a user under our license. So you are welcome to use it, but you're going to want to kind of decide if it meets the quality standards that you have for your class as you're going into that particular content. So if you wanted to go back to that home page, in addition to kind of seeing the resources within a concept page, if you were looking for some of that adaptive practice or interactive simulations and Plix, then you could explore and browse those through this homepage. So that's kind of one way to go about accessing content. The next way would be to think about, I want to build a unit. So I want to build multiple concepts that work together. So let's say, and these are kind of my demo subjects that show up. So if you picked your subjects, those would be the ones that would show up first. But you can always see all of the subjects offered by clicking that option. Now, if I go into measurement, I could build a whole unit on equivalent metric units by just putting together resources from capacity, length, and mass. And if I click on any one of those, you'll see it will take you to that concept page again. In this case, we have a read, Plix, and kind of that practice option that's all at grade. And then it looks like we maybe have some videos that are supporting videos that might be good if a student was struggling as well. So you could add in those particular pieces and build a unit using multiple resources between them. So if we go back to this list here, this is what we call our concept browse page for any particular branch. And that's where you're going to see all of the concepts that are listed for that particular part. Now, the other tab, the Flexbooks tab, which you can see from here, has middle school concepts because you have content for both middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade that includes measurement topics. If I went back and browsed the math topics, and you can do that from the home page or this browse icon up here, and I picked a different area. So in algebra, once again, I see all of my concepts, and then I can click on the Flexbook tab. And algebra spans middle school and high school, so you'll see both your middle school content and your high school content as you work your way through. You can sort by languages, so a lot of our newer concept collections, we actually have the Spanish translations of them available as well. And then you can search levels. So you could look for kind of an advanced area, an honors version, an at-grade version, whatever you were looking for. And so one thing to understand on how this works, let's say we have the Algebra 1 Concepts book up here and an Algebra 1 Second Edition book down here. Let's open both of those just so you can see what they look like. So if I go into the second edition one, which is our original Flexbook, we took all of the content in there, and these are pretty similar to traditional lessons within a textbook. Here we have 8 different sections, and each section includes multiple skills for that particular topic. So patterns and equations, equations and inequalities might have multiple skills built in. If I went to the same concept in the concepts book, you'll see that this chapter now has 17 different sections because we really broke down patterns and expressions, words that describe patterns, and we took those and we broke them into our smaller concepts. And that's the idea of understanding and supporting at that lower level. So from here, you can also see that you could add this whole Flexbook or this whole chapter to a Flexbook if you wanted to do so. You could do the same thing from the whole textbook level. And here's where you'll see our offline reader. So this is based on Chrome. So if you're using a Chrome browser, you could open this reader. And I've already chosen to allow it to see stuff. And I can download the whole book, or I can download certain chapters and access them offline. And the great thing about this is that it's really easy to kind of download any updates and access material when students don't have clean connectivity. So let's go back to the main page I was working off of. And let's talk about one other place to find full textbooks. So these are the CK-12 books, and they can be found either through search or under any browser option. But if you're looking for user-created content, the other option is if you're on the teacher page, you'll see this schools icon. If I click on that, it will take me to probably whatever state you're in, if you happen to be within the US, and I can pick on an area. So the other day we had someone from a district down in Texas, and you can see all of the resources that different schools have created or customized within our site and published under their school option. And so if I scroll down to that particular district, El Paso has not only customized math and science content that we had available for them, but they've actually started building English content on our site, as well as history content, so government, geography, and history. And this is a great place and resource if you're looking to cover an area that's not already covered by CK-12 in our core content as a great starting place. So you could open that up, decide which parts you want to work with, customize anything else you want to change. And these are all republished under the same license, so you are free to use and customize them as well. Now, the last place that you might be looking for different pieces, or the last goal that you might have, is finding standards aligned content. So I just clicked that icon and went back to the home page for the teacher. And there's two ways to find standards aligned content. One is clicking on the standard option. And we have Common Core and Next Generation Science standards. So if I click on that, it will take me to my pages and the different standards that are aligned that way. So if I did high school physical science, you'll see that there are a number of different areas that are covered in here that hit any particular standard. And then if I clicked on one of those pages, it would take me to that concept page with all of the resources available for that concept. The other option, if I go back to the home page again, is to find a standards aligned Flexbook. So I could look for Common Core standards. I could pick an area, let's say calculus, grade 11 that I'm working with. And it's going to pull up all books that have a calculus standard that are tagged as being potentially an option for that grade level. So calculus concepts, pre-calc, and math analysis are our concept collections that are tagged to those standards. And I can click on this little link, and it will show me all of the standards that match that particular piece. So depending on kind of what your goal is in finding content on CK-12, you have all of those different options. And if you don't remember any of them, or you're not sure where to start, that search bar is always a great place to start to look for your content.
Katie, did you want to quickly maybe show them the difference between a student and a teacher account while you're there on the standards alignment section?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. So if we look at the home page for a teacher, you'll notice that it has the standards alignment, it has a standards aligned Flexbook, it has the schools page on it. If I switch to the student version of this, they have the schools option up here. We don't actually present the standards to students because most of them don't care what random state standard they're learning on any day. And we thought that the study guides, which are a quick resource for them to review a topic, might be more valuable. So in that case, we put that part there. If we looked at a particular book, let's actually pull up an algebra book again. And let's look at the concept collection for that. So our concepts books are tagged one-to-one with our other resources, including practice. And so if I look at that from a teacher standpoint, and let's pick the first section in here, you can see, in addition to the text, that there is an option to preview the practice that would be related to that, or I can scroll down to the bottom And I can see other resources, and clicking any one of these would take me to my concept page. Now, if I switch over for a second to a student account, so let's log into CK-12. And I'm going to pull up the same book here. So algebra, clicking on the high school tab, the concepts, and then that first section of this book, the definition of variable. For the student, especially if they're accessing this without coming from the concept page, we really wanted to encourage them to do that practice. So we've actually just started testing out including practice right next to their text. So you might start seeing this practice widget across our concept collections if you're in a student account. And that's the full practice option. It's kind of showing up as if it was on a mobile device of some sort. And if you wanted students to actually do this and see how they were doing, you could assign that matching practice within a CK-12 group. So those are probably the two big differences between student and teacher accounts right now. One is the homepage and what you might be using, and then the other is how practice appears in a particular read within a concept collection.
Katie, we have a question reminding, we kind of talked about it earlier, but who vets content from CK-12? And then you showed them the schools page. Who's vetting the content that is that user contributed part?
So for CK-12, and I'm just going to switch back because I'm back in a teacher page as we talk, but all of the CK-12 content kind of came from two places. One is it was donated by kind of a respected resource. So let's say if we look at biology and we look at these textbooks, you'll see some advanced concepts, understanding biodiversity. We can go in here. This one was created by CK-12. And then if we look at our detailed authors, you'll see anything that we created ourselves, we actually went through the same process that a publisher would go through. We looked at scope and sequence. We hired experts in the area, educators, science experts, or math experts to kind of build and write that content. It then went through a peer review, tech edit, and copy edit process before it was published. So that's kind of how CK-12's content works. And that's true for both math and science content, as well as the other areas that are on there. Some of the other places, and you might see them within a concept, or let's look at these more areas, because I know that there's plenty here. So for example, health. Health Corps is a program that was developed by one of our partners, and they are doing a lot of work kind of building healthy programming within schools. And so that's a case where we decided to partner with them and host that on our site. And so they worked with it. You'll also see donated resources from college professors. You'll see stuff from Stanford and MIT and NASA. And so kind of well-respected programs that are interested in what we're doing and have either partnered directly with us or donated content to us. And that's all the content that you'll find within the main browse or that CK-12 tab of our search bar. And so anything there we curate, we keep up to date, we make sure it's working, and that's continually getting feedback from users and updating accordingly. If you went into search and you just search literature, for example, you'll see our content that we have plus a lot of community contributed content. And this would be the same content that you might see on a schools page. Now, I've been to Leanne Gray's classroom, and I can probably vouch for the fact that she's got some good stuff in here. But so in this particular case, you'd want to see, have they been updating it? Is it still active? The last time that it was updated maybe. And so because we have 150,000 variations of our FLEXBOOks on our site, we do not, as a small team of 30 or so of us, have the ability to continually curate all that content. So that's why we've kept our core content separate, so we can match the quality content within CK-12. And then, if there's anything inappropriate, then we would address that in the community contributed piece. But in terms of, is this matching exactly how I want to phrase something, or the level of content I want to cover, that would be something that within our core content we can standardize and talk to you about, and then within community contributed, you would have to make that decision on your own.
We had a lot of questions come in when you started talking about the offline reader as far as what that means for students. So one question that I'm looking at right now is, are the offline Flexbooks, able to run other modalities like videos, animations, sims, flicks? So Katie, could you talk one about what do they see, if some of those aren't available in the absence of Wi-Fi? And then there's a lot of discussion around, does that work in Chrome? Do notes work with that? Maybe just talk a little bit more about the restrictions and the functionality of offline.
Yeah, so looking at this offline reader, you're really getting the core text for that content. You would get a note about a video embedded in there, but you wouldn't be able to necessarily see that offline. The same deal with, I don't believe at this time that our highlighting options are synced between offline and online readers. So I would recommend that if you want the full access to all of the resources and the pieces that go with this content, that you're accessing it online through a standard browser option. This is really to allow you to continue to read. And if we looked at this, you'd see here's a particular topic. Here's the resources here. If I'm accessing it online, I'd be able to probably play that. So we could click that. It would open up that video and I'd be able to play it. But if I'm offline, then clearly it wouldn't automatically pop it open and let me read it. So that's kind of the difference between accessing it online versus offline. The practice has to be accessed online because you're inputting stuff into a system that's accessing our database. We do also have, if I go back to our page and scroll all the way down to the bottom, in the tools and apps, we do have a similar app for physics simulations, so students could download the physics sims and access them offline at this time. So that's probably the one place that you would be able to access something that's a little more interactive offline, but it wouldn't be through the Flexbook app, it would be through the simulations app specifically.
Okay, I think we've still got some open questions in our Q&A, but they're related to customization and some functions that I think you're about to show. So if it's okay, let's go ahead and start moving on to the next section here about, once you've selected your book, how to make it your own. And keep the questions coming into Q&A. We will get to all questions.
Sure, I can start. So let me actually talk just for a moment about our license for Creative Commons. So if any of our content is licensed under Creative Commons non-commercial licensing, and if that's something that you're not familiar with, it's come up a couple times in other webinars as well, but we want to make sure that you understand that it's a non-commercial use and it includes attribution. So anytime you are customizing content from CK-12, you need to make sure that you maintain that attribution as you work your way through. And if you're adding other content to a customized book and sharing it, then you need to make sure that you have that content that is licensed correctly under that particular piece. So let's show you what it looks like to kind of start customizing. If I look at physical science, I'm going to pick my physical science concepts book for middle school. I could have picked the high school one, but this one's correlated one-to-one with my practice and stuff, so I'm actually going to work off of this one for today. And all I have to do to start this customization process is click this customize button, as Lindsay said. And the first thing I'm probably going to do is retitle it. So for June 26th, and I could put a school name in there. I could change whatever you wanted. Because I demo in this account, I'm just tagging it with today's date, so I know exactly which one I'm working off of. And I can do a number of different pieces here. So in this particular case, you'll see that I have a draft in here because one of these sections I was working on it earlier, kind of with a different piece. And so that's one part. Just if you're pointing towards, anytime you customize a book or a chapter within our content, you're customizing at that level. And any of these reads that are right here, so nature of science, scientific induction, scientific theory, until you start editing them, it's really just holding a shortcut to our main content, which means that if you don't want to update them and you want a notification if that particular page has been updated, that's totally fine. If you do want to start editing them, we'll get into what that looks like in a minute. But just in the biggest, broadest options, besides renaming your book, you could choose to delete an entire chapter or section. So I'm going to delete the whole chapter on energy. Let's say I'm not covering that for a particular smaller unit. If I decided later I wanted to put it back in, I could always use that add to Flexbook option that I showed you earlier to add it back to this book. So don't worry if you cut something from CK-12 out of your book and you decide next year you want to put it back in. I can rearrange at the chapter level, so motion and forces, and then chemical interactions, using these drag arrow options, or I could put them back. And I could work within 2 different chapters if I wanted to drag between chapters. So let's say I wanted to pull something from chapter 2 into chapter 3, and I would just need to make sure that I had both of those chapters open so that I could work within one to another. So renaming, deleting, reordering, pretty straightforward. The last piece that you can do for any one of these things is to add content. So you could search CK-12 for content, but you're probably, if you're going to add content from CK-12, it's easier to browse and add to a Flexbook, because this just gives you the titles as you're working through. Otherwise, when you're in a particular topic, so let's say I was going to add scientific notation, you'll see a bunch of different options. So it's probably easier to go to the page in scientific notation that you want and then add it that way. I could add a new chapter. Let's say I wanted to add a chapter on math skills for physical science. Physical science. And I can add an intro for the chapter, a summary, added details where if I'm pulling content for pieces, I'm going to want to add in who wrote that content. So that's a place to add attributions. And I can save that chapter. And then I could take any of these areas and any of the topics within here, and I could open up both chapters and drag a topic from here into this particular area. So now that particular topic fits in my new chapter. And for some of the longer science ones, you may want to break them into smaller chapters, and you're welcome to do that. The other option is to upload a Word file or a Google Doc. Just know that each Word file or each Google Doc translates to a single section, such as motion, within your book. Excuse me. So you're going to want to make sure that you have those separated so that they match 2 sections as you work your way in there.
Katie, is this a good place to pause and maybe go over some best practices for people who are going to be doing some collaborative editing with others? What advice do you have for them when working on our system?
Sure. So one thing I would say is whether you're working with multiple people or one person, you always want to limit the number of open pieces of your Flexbook. So if you look up here at the top, you can see that this says revision 159. Okay, and so it's pulling, because I've worked with this book before, you're going to maybe see extra revision numbers in there today. But that tab and that link tracks my revisions for the book as a whole. And so what's important about that is that if I then open this book in another tab, so if I went in here, I went to my library, you can always find your content in your library. And I filtered by Flexbooks. And actually, I don't think I've saved this one yet, so it's not showing up in this one immediately, but let's save this for a second. Basically, I want to save this book and then go elsewhere and access all of the resources and add them to this Flexbook. I don't want to have this book open in this tab and another revision of it open in this tab, you know, or multiple people working within the same account at the same time. Because when I save that particular page, so it's saving all of this new content into my account, so it's just taking a couple of minutes to get that started the first time. When I save all of this content and this revision number, if I've made edits in another tab with a new revision number, and then I come back and save this old one, that's where you're going to start overwriting your own content. So try to keep one page, one tab, one part that you're working with, and then when you're done and this is saved, oh, it looks like it just went from there. Now, if I went to my library, I should see that as this new book for today, and I can go back in and I can edit it from there. So I just don't want to have it open in too many places and too many different times so that I'm not overwriting myself or another person working on my team isn't overriding. So one person, one tab is kind of your best policy as you're working from there.
Okay, related to that, we had a couple questions about customizing a Flexbook, and I think you were just showing that revision history in the URL. One user asked, once you've saved your customized Flexbook and sent the link to your students, does the link continue to update if you continue to update your content?
Yeah, and actually, maybe this is a good time to show you what the change in a read would look like. So anytime I update this content and I save what I just did at the chapter or kind of larger table of contents level, that would get pushed out and updated, and anyone who had that link would be able to see that piece. If I went into an actual topic itself and started to change it, there's two different ways to do this. And so maybe we'll just move into this kind of advanced editing stage and show you what that looks like. So scientific induction, if I click on this pencil icon, that's your edit icon across our site. June 26th, I'm just gonna keep things organized in my library. And this now separates that book from CK-12. So once I start customizing it, CK-12 isn't linked anymore. So if we make updates on our site for that book, we're not gonna override your updates in any way. If they were still linked, we'd give you the option to kind of see the newest version of it. If you've separated it from there, then you have full control over that. But it's not going to be linked anymore, and it's not going to show you those different pieces. So I think since we're streaming all this fun stuff right now, our internet's just taking a little longer to save from there. So we'll give you a second there. But let's look at kind of the options as you go in here. So the minute I start editing this, I can do basic edits. I can change the text. I could update the text and say the detective in this photo is investigating, etc. Now, to answer your question, if let's say I'm editing a chapter or a section within a chapter, and I get called into a meeting and I'm not done editing and I don't really want my users to see these updates that I've made, I can choose keep as draft. And that means that they're seeing the last finalized version of that text. Once I'm done updating all of my content, then I'd want to click this finalize draft option, and that pushes the content out to anyone who has that link, whether they're accessing it from search or the direct link or a schools page. That finalized draft is really your save and share option for any updated content. If you finalize it, you can always go back and edit it, but the draft is like, I'm working on draft mode, and then I want others to be able to see it. In addition to kind of changing text here, you can see your standard like menu bar at the top for bold and italics, all of those options. We have the ability to add images here, multimedia, and our math editor. And those are all going to be covered in that advanced editing piece. So we're just kind of showing you where those are right now, and we can cover those later, but we wanted to make sure that you knew kind of where those were on the toolbar. So once I've made these updates, here's your image piece. I can update the images. I could include math text. Let's say I wanted to format something. You know, this is a science thing that doesn't include a lot of math text, but I'll just show you for 2 seconds. If I click on that, it will pop up our math editor, and you can pull in a drop-down menu to work off of that piece. So you can kind of do some different options. So go ahead and play around with that and see what questions you have and come into that advanced editing section with that. But once I finalize this draft and I say, okay, I've made my updates, what I wanted to show you from that piece, and then I've now finalized it because I want that to be available to our users on the other side. There's a number of different ways that you can share that content. So the first option for that is to share kind of within CK-12 groups. So I'm going to just pull up a different particular one in our library while this is updating and saving. So if I pull this book up, you can see the option to share to groups right here. And any group that I already have, I could share that resource to, or I could create a new group. And we can talk more about groups and practice sessions or at the end of this, but that's an option to share within a CK-12 class. I can, if you'll see this green ShareAplane option at the bottom of a page, that's for basically any page on CK-12 once you're in content areas. And I can share via social media or an email link, or I can share it directly to Google Classroom from here and pick a class and then choose an action for that particular piece. We also are integrated with Canvas and Schoology. I know someone asked one of those questions earlier, and you can actually access our content from within their platforms. So that's an option. But for something that we're not integrated with, this URL, you'll notice, has a unique ID for the user. And so you can just share that URL with your students on any other platform that you're working with. And then the last option here is to publish this. And so the difference between kind of something that's published and something that you've shared that's been finalized is that publish then allows it to show up on that search option for other users within CK-12, and you can then add it to your school's page from there. So you want to make sure that if you're sharing a URL, that's totally fine. But if you wanted to also make it available, and at that point, we encourage you to do that and continue to add to the library of resources CK-12 has. And then you can also access this in an offline reader. So if you're working from the reader or our FLEXBOOK app, then you'd want to, and you're using CK-12 content, you can pull all of that up that way. If you're accessing a community contributed or something that you've customized, just make sure you go to that in a browser and then click the offline reader or click kind of the app option from there. So those are the basics for publishing and sharing. And I think we're going to stop for some questions now.
Yes, rapid fire questions here. All right, Katie. We are a one-to-one iPad school. Are there a lot of limitations in using an iPad over a laptop?
There are not from a student perspective. So students can access the content via browse or via one of the apps that we had been talking about. When they're working, that's actually a great way for them to kind of, the scratch pad and practice works really well. The only place that I would say you really want to use a laptop or desktop over an iPad is when editing. Some of the editing gets a little tricky if you're trying to do it on an iPad. So as a teacher customizing, I would recommend doing that customization on a kind of full computer, and then accessing our content works on the tablet. Some of the phones, I'd say probably most phones are too small to access our interactives on that screen size, but your tablet should be totally fine.
Okay, we have a user asking for you to say again how the content isn't linked to CK-12 anymore. Do you edit and then it is no longer linked?
It's still linked within the CK-12 platform, but if I change, let's say we look at this matter option. If I click on this particular page and it opens up right now, because I didn't touch anything in that particular chapter, all of these areas, the properties, measurement, changes, energy, etc., are really just pointing towards the original CK-12 book and the resources within there. So if we make an update to that, you'll see kind of up near the top of your screen, right above this chapter title, you'll sometimes see this little bar that says, you're not looking at the newest version of this concept. Would you like to view it? So if you haven't made any changes and we've updated something from our end, you can then choose to update directly. Once you start editing this page and changing the content, well, then we wouldn't want to override that by putting our updates in there. So while it still lives within the CK-12 platform, it's not a shortcut to our page anymore. It's now a direct link to your exact page and your customized content.
A question about differentiation. For sharing the FLEXBooks for differentiation purposes, I would need to share different versions of the FLEXBOOK. Is that correct?
Yes, you would need to do so if you want them to see different levels of that FLEXBOOK or different resources within that FLEXBOOK. Kind of if you're looking at any of our, just going back to the home page for a second and picking some areas, so let's say chemistry. For the FLEXBooks here, we have a basic chemistry and intermediate chemistry, and here's some of those resources that we worked with a partner version. So this would be a case where you could pull resources from the basic one and the intermediate one and give them to the appropriate students. Or you could add in some of the resources from the basic into that intermediate book by customizing it, and then share that together and assign certain pieces of that book to different people. But you would need to kind of show them the different resources accordingly.
Okay, just to be conscious of time as we're approaching the hour mark here, I'm going to take back control of the screen for a few minutes and talk to you guys about your assignment and some wrap-up materials, but we do still have a few open questions, and I think you guys are finding out that we always stay on at the end of the webinar to answer any questions that you have. So let me wrap up formally here, and then we're going to continue on with the Q&A. So I'm going to share my screen again. And here we go. You guys who are completing a CK-12 certified educator program, a pathway, this is your assignment that goes with FLEXBOOKS 101. You can access it at this tinyurl.com/CEP17 FB101, Certified Educator Program 2017, FLEXBOOK 101. Or this is available on our program page. That's ck12.org/certified2017. This is home base for anything you want to know about the program. This is where we have our office hours listed. This is where we have session information and any resources. We include the assignment underneath every session that we've had so far in the program. And at the very bottom of this page is where you find the archived videos from each of the sessions that you guys are able to watch on demand. We've been getting some feedback and we love it. We look through every single one of your comments. This is not part of the assignment, but after any webinar, if you're encouraged to give us feedback of things we did well or things we could do better, you can do that at this tiny URL link, CEP 2017 feedback. That's the same link across every session all summer long. Send us feedback as you guys feel compelled. So thanks for joining us. You are always supported at CK-12. You can ask questions at support@ck12.org at any time. We also have quite a flurry of activity happening on our social media right now as you guys are sharing your participation in this program with others. You can tag us at CK12 Foundation or hashtag CK12 Foundation. So any of you guys who need to duck off this webinar, go ahead. We're going to stay on and we're going to continue going through that Q&A queue that we have.
Great. So I think I'll start by answering some just very direct, easy questions. We were asked the best size for tablets for students to use when accessing CK-12 content. You can access all of our content on a 7-inch screen size or larger. For some of the PLIX interactives, so let me share my screen again. So our simulations here work on your 7-inch screen size. The PLIX do work on there. The resolution on some of the Android ones is a little bit off, so we often recommend a 9-inch size or larger, but they will work, especially on the iPad minis. I know they work fine on there at that 7 inches or larger mark. And then browsing our content or using our adaptive practice system, you can do that even on a mobile phone, so that's not an issue. These are really the two interactive pieces where you're going to want a little bit larger screen size just to be able to manipulate that. So we have a question about once a Flexbook is published, can it still be edited? Yes, you can always go back into your, and this is actually where you find your Flexbooks in that library. So even if I publish this, I could go back in, click on it, and I would no longer see the option to publish because I would have already published it, but I would still see this edit option. So I can edit it from there. We had kind of a matching one on where to start a textbook from scratch, and I realized I don't think I actually covered that. So if I was going to start all the way from scratch and not by adding content from somewhere else, you would go to your library, because that's where all of your new content lives, and you would click Create New. And then you could create a new read, a new quiz, standards aligned, so you'd be pulling from some stuff and including standards, or you could just create a new Flexbook textbook. And then it would give you that blank bucketing structure, and then you'd start adding chapters. So adding content, new chapter, so I need to add a title. So in honor of Lindsay, let's say Literature 101. And then I'm going to add a new chapter in here and say Overview. And once I do that, I can start going from there. I could then pull, I'm just going to save this because, once again, reminder, if I'm working within it, I can work within this book and edit it. If I'm going outside of this book, I'm going to save it. And then I'm going to start accessing, oops, it looks like we got a little error within that piece. I think I haven't worked all the way through this part, but let's say I was looking at this elsewhere and CK-12, and I got something on literature that I wanted to pull up. I could pull from here any of these reads, so writing about literature, the basics, and I could add this read to my Flexbook. And if that had saved cleanly, you'd see that option there. Or this is a great place to start as well. I could create a new Flexbook from here, literature for June 26, and add that to that textbook. So as long as I'm not editing within the textbook, it looks like we're having a little difficulty saving right now. So I'm going to stop from there. But that would be the idea and what you would be working with. And you could update and add to your Flexbook that way, or build from scratch from your library.
Okay, there's a question about how CK-12 is funded, and I guess the concern is are we funded by grants that have some sort of agenda or political agenda? CK-12 is generously funded by a private family foundation, and so we are not really in the grant business per se. And then, like we said, all of our content, some of it is donated content, and then some of it goes through the process just like the publishers. It is vetted, it is technically edited. So I would say that our oh, Katie wants to jump in on this one as I'm finding the words.
So as Lindsay was saying, we're fully funded by a family foundation. We are working in conjunction with one grant right now, specifically for some college level textbooks, where we were approached and asked if we would consider creating college level text for some of those introductory level classes. So very, very shortly, you'll start seeing a college algebra, a college pre-calculus, and a college human biology text on our site. And those were done in conjunction with a grant, simply because that foundation approached us and said, we think what you're doing is great and we want to encourage you to do this. Would you consider doing this as part of a project? And so because that aligned cleanly with our goals, we decided to take that grant and do that project. But I would say that there's nothing that would kind of compromise where we're going from, because we are fully funded and we have the ability to pick and choose grants that support our mission and work our way through.
All right, we've got a fairly specific question here about our chemistry books. With the different chemistry books as an example, what are the differences between basic and intermediate? Are they the same content, just at different levels? There's several more questions here. Could they be assigned in a class and used without much editing? Like, we're on chapter 2, topic 1, and I ask members of both groups to read it, and we will all be on the same page? Or do I really need to look closely and maybe rearrange things to match?
So I would say I'm going to answer this broadly first. You're going to want to check any particular topic. So let's say we open the chemistry basic book here. And you can see an introduction to chem, matter and change. Let's look at this option. This one has properties of matter, classification of matter, and changes in matter. A lot of our leveled books are our original books. So in this case, this is a chemistry basic book. And then if I went back to the FLEXBooks and looked at the chemistry intermediate original book, you'd see kind of the same area of topics, but the individual reads might have changed a bit within that regard, especially if you're working between this was kind of your original intermediate level book, and then that concepts book. So the concepts book isn't going to match one-to-one with particular topics, because we took those topics in matter and change and we broke them into all of these different areas. So that would be a case where, kind of depending on the resources that you're using, you may find that they are just a more advanced level of something, or you may find that they don't correlate cleanly one-to-one because of the way that we reorganized and broke down those chapters. I was looking at another book recently where the topics within here were broken down, and they actually have less chapters because they kind of combined stuff together when they broke them into concepts. So you're just going to need to look at those resources and say, I want to use this for this particular kid and that for that particular kid. And if they line up cleanly, you're good to go. And if you're using different resources at different levels and a mixture of 1.x books or our original books and our concepts, then you will need to do a little more correlation to kind of make that work out.
We have a request to see how to add a new section under a chapter. Can you show that again real quick, Katie?
Sure. So if I go to my library and I want to edit this book that I was working on today, you'll see that I finalized this. It's totally fine. And now I can edit it again. And I made this brand new chapter. So if I wanted to add new content to this, I have two options. One is to add it from within the book itself. And so I could say add content. I'm going to search for, let's see, what's my topic? Conversion. Let's say I could search and I could say conversion between, let's say, customer units, because that might be something that you'd see in different places that you might need to work with. And now I've added a section to this book, and I can drag it into this chapter accordingly. Let's see if I can get that to work in there. And that added that section to there. I could then save this book with that new part. And while it's saving, I'm going to start browsing for a second. So CK-12. Let's make sure it's saved. Okay, good. So we're not in danger of going from there. But I could even search within the same thing. I could say, let's add something on scientific notation. And let's say I like this particular read for scientific notation. I'm going to add this to my Flexbook. So this is the advantage of adding your school's name or something like that. You might get to see clean books as you're working your way through. So that's adding that particular read to the Flexbook I was working on. And once that saves, we can go back in. Anytime you add, whether it's to a quiz or to a Flexbook, I think our system's having a little glitch right now. So technically that's what you would do. You'd add it in there. And then you'd be able to see that particular part at the bottom of this read. So if that had saved cleanly right now, and I don't want to waste your time, but that's the process, I would then be able to look at the bottom of this, and there would be that read right here under the Math Skills for Physical Science. And when I clicked edit, I could drag it in just like I did from that particular resource. So whether you're adding it from within the table of contents or you're saving the table of contents, browsing, adding to a Flexbook, and then re-editing, kind of and organizing it, those are both options to add resources to there.
A quick program-related question of, do you offer certificates for professional development for participating in these webinars? And what we do is we will provide documentation of your attendance in our live webinars and the completion of any assignments. So if you attend any webinars with us, you can always contact us and we will give you a certificate that shows the hours that you participated in our live webinars. But it's really up to you and up to your district how that converts to professional development. So we are not professional development providers, but we certainly want to give you anything we can that you can take to your district and ask for those hours. If you complete the full certification program, one of the last sessions is going to have all the information that you need to fill out, and we will give you your badge and your certificate saying that you are a certified educator for you to take to your district.
So we have a question here that asks about the URL. So I am at the table of contents level for this entire book, and this URL at the top of my screen is the URL I would use if I wanted to share it via that URL. So you don't have to go looking for it. If I went into any chapter and then it included the section number in there, I could share this URL if I just wanted to share chapter 1, for example. So know that if you started mixing and matching chapters, you would need to update your links, because chapter 1 is currently Introduction to Physical Science. And if I changed it and deleted it, then chapter 2 would bump to chapter 1. But whatever your kind of current standard is, you can pull that URL from the top of that page.
What about Flexbook access? We have a question of, can a Flexbook icon be put into our single sign-on one login that our students access through their Google Drive accounts?
So let me talk about single sign-on in general and then Google Drive specifically. So if I sign out of this for a minute, you have the option when you join or when you sign in to use Google, Facebook, Twitter, or Microsoft, or create an account using a username and password. So if I sign in with Google, you're already logged into Google, and it will just kick you into your CK-12 account. And in that case, you could kind of access all of your content that way. So that's one piece in terms of accessing that. For single sign-on options like Clever and ClassLink, you can actually add the CK-12 app as a whole. I believe that is accessing the full breadth of CK-12 and not a specific Flexbook itself. But if you are curious more about that, feel free to email us, and we will get you more specifics on that particular piece. But in general, you can use a single sign-on option and access CK-12 for Clever and ClassLink, or using one of those single sign-on options here, but that would get you to the full site that you're working with.
Okay, we've got a question about practice and a question about groups, which of course we hope you're going to attend our other sessions that discuss those more thoroughly. But Katie, how do you respond to this first one? I'm pushing for students to practice with constructed response questions. Are these available?
Yeah, so if you go into our practice app, so if we look here, we can browse our practice this way. And you'll see a number of different options for practice. So any particular topic in here, it's going to have choices for multiple choice, true and the false, kind of select all answers, and then also questions that are asking for a short answer or for a fill in the blank option. But for any of those blanks, there's really only probably up to 3 words that we ever ask for because of the way our system works. We did recently develop an open response question, and that's mostly used within CK-12 within our Plex. So if I pulled up Plex and I picked a particular topic, let's say one that we haven't talked about yet today, so maybe geometry. I can always search that Plex just the way you can search the rest of the site by doing this. And let's search for one on adding angles. So if I clicked on this piece, this is what our interactive Plex looks like if you missed our session that included some of those there. But I can manipulate the Plex itself, the interactive, I get some directions. And then as I work my way through, I'm just gonna, because it's an exploratory tool, we allow them to see the correct answer right away. But I'm just going to work my way through so you can see the last answer. So there was some kind of open answers and some multiple choice answers, more open. And then probably getting at what you're really looking for is a question like this, that's saying, what's the angle measure of this? That's really asking a broader question. And because our system doesn't know how to, at this point in time, kind of grade a paragraph answer for a particular piece, we allow these questions to either be discuss your answer with others, and then some that are already linked to questions within the CK-12 forum. So let me just pull up here for a second. This cafe is our forum. And if you go to the cafe, it's fine, I'm leaving that page. you can see this Plix corner. And so you'll see a lot of kind of questions that relate to Plix that are really that open discussion question. And then you'll start seeing students answer accordingly. So if you're looking for ways to, access options for assigning content that includes more open discussion questions, then they currently exist within Plix. And then I would also say that open discussion question type is available within our questions. So you could build all of your own questions that included that piece.
So the next big one was the, how would you create groups in order to assign the differentiated material?
Great. So there's kind of two ways, and it looks like we have questions about accessing CK-12 through Schoology as well. So whether you're accessing these within the groups feature, so you can get to groups directly through here or through your teacher dashboard, and then choosing your groups option. And you can add a new group. You're going to want to make sure it's a class group here so that you can actually make assignments as you're working your way through. So that's one way to actually kind of assign work in that particular way. And if you wanted kind of differentiated materials, you could create one big one for your class and then also two other groups that were more resource-based for that differentiated instruction. So a student can be in more than one group if you want to assign to a large group and then to like groups A, B, and C or something like that. So that would be how you would create that group. If you then went into any one of these, you could pick the assignments option and create an assignment from within there. Or if you were looking at any particular resource, so let's click back to this one, you might see this assign to class option at the top of an interactive or on the side, kind of in that menu navigation piece on the side of read and video modalities. So you could assign them that way. If you have access to CK-12 through Schoology, you're accessing it within there. We're not specifically covering Schoology and other learning management systems in the advanced webinar for FLEXBOOKs. It's really more that the practice would be the part that has those reports in there. And so there's actually, because learning management systems are a different kind of topic area, we created an entire webinar on that. So if you missed it, we covered it last week. It's called Learning Management Systems, and we'll cover it again in July. So you can join us for that, and that will go into those details, or I can show them to you if you wanted to see something specific. And then we say, can you combine multiple pre-made practice assignments into one? Yes, and actually, let's see if this group has a good one. So if I look at reports for a second here, it might tell me what I'm looking at. Let's see if we could find one recently. We've been making a lot of random practice to demo stuff. So this particular one has practice for addition, selecting the correct sentence, addition, selecting the incorrect sentence, and this is a quiz that someone didn't title when they made it and included in there. All three of those are part of one particular assignment. Each of the individual practice pieces, those first two addition parts, work within our adaptive practice system and adjust to student learning. And then the quiz is a specific set of questions that the teacher created that they want them to actually be able to do a particular amount. And then we have another question about future webinars going to include how to use workbooks and assignments to students. Yes, we have a customizing practice session tomorrow. So that's kind of the advanced one. And then our Groups in Practice 101, which we hosted last week and we'll host again the week after July 4th, will both include those options.
All right, that was a ton of information and a lot of questions. I think we have cleared out all of the questions. So unless anything comes in the next couple of seconds, we are going to sign off and see all of you later. Thanks so much.